Good afternoon and welcome. I'm Savina Carluccio and I'm Executive Director at the International Coalition for Sustainable Infrastructure, ICSI. On behalf of ICSI and our partners at the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure, CDRI, thank you for joining us today. After the launch of the Global Infrastructure Resilience Survey earlier this year, this webinar is the first in a series that ICSI and CDRI are convening throughout 2026 to deep dive and explore what results mean for different regions. So today we're focusing on Europe and Central Asia, and here's the plan for today's session. We will start with a presentation from our colleagues at CDRI, and the presentation will be on the Global Infrastructure Resilience Report 2025 that launched at COP30, which the survey we did is a key component of. After a brief introduction to the Global Infrastructure Resilience Survey, we will go into a panel discussion to explore the findings from a regional perspective, in this case, Europe and Central Asia, and we will draw on the experience and expertise of our panelists who are addressing these challenges across different countries and sectors. So now, please engage with us throughout the session, add your comments and questions throughout using the chat or using the Q&A box, and I will try to integrate them into our discussion. And if you want to, please say hello and tell us who you are and where you're joining us from today. And we're ready to start. So with that, it's always a pleasure to welcome Raina Singh, who is Lead Specialist Capacity Development at CDRI. The floor is yours, Raina, to talk about the Global Infrastructure Resilience Report 2025.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Savina. I hope I'm audible, clear from this side, and I'll just share my screen. May I just confirm if you can see my screen? Yes.
All good.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. I'm Raina Singh. I'm a Lead Specialist Capacity Development at the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure, CDRI. I also had the pleasure of steering the second Global Infrastructure Resilience Report together with ICSI and other partners, and you're going to be hearing more on that from all of us. So thank you for joining us, and thanks to also all the partners and speakers who have joined us today, the participants who have joined us today from various countries across Europe and Central Asia. I really hope that you enjoy some of the insights, and these are informative for you from this webinar. So to give you a brief overview of the report, the GIR 2025, as we call it, maybe I can just start, for some of those who may not be aware about CDRI, just to give you a quick introduction. CDRI is an international organization, a coalition of 57 countries and 12 member organizations. And all these partners are working together on advancing the agenda of disaster resilient infrastructure, basically strengthening capacities of infrastructure systems and assets to address climate and disaster risks. From the Secretariat, which is headquartered here in Delhi, where I'm joining from, we are supporting our members through advocacy, through technical assistance, and through research, knowledge management, and capacity development to forward this agenda. And as part of our interactions, when we engage with our members and our country governments, the first, questions that we hear from them on DRI is, as they do appreciate the impacts that infrastructure systems are currently facing across the globe, across different countries. But in order to take action, they want to know things like, how much damage will our country's infrastructure face from natural hazards and disasters? What hazards will cause the most damage? Which of my sectors are going to be most impacted? Which regions, provinces, or cities are going to be most impacted? And what are the kind of enabling policy and regulatory changes should we be focusing on from the government? What role can the private sector and businesses play in the process? So these are some of the questions that we, typically get asked that governments face in this process. And from CDRI, we are trying to address some of these questions through our flagship Global Infrastructure Resilience Report. The first report was launched in 2023. This report provided a first comprehensive assessment of global infrastructure resilience with respect to climate and disaster risks. What it also did was to provide a robust information base for private sector and for governments to understand their risks and to be able to take investment decisions. So that was what the first report was about. In the second report in 2025 that we launched at COP, like Savina mentioned, the second report basically moved from from what to how. So how can countries and different stakeholders go about addressing resilience in infrastructure systems, and also in the process capture co-benefits, not just addressing direct impacts, but also indirect impacts on economies and other sectors. So the second infrastructure report that I'll be sharing some key messages from today with you. It followed a very intensive process of consultation. We engaged with more than 150 experts. We did the global surveys, like Savina mentioned. So more than 3,000 professionals across 100 plus countries. We engaged with 500 businesses, trying to understand the impact on businesses and what private sector can do. And we also came up, we collated more than 70 case studies from 41 countries to be able to showcase the action that is already being taken up, and also showcasing some replicable models which can be then implemented across other geographies as well. The report also provides modeling assessments at global level, regional level, as well as national and subnational level for 12 countries. So what you will find if you go to the report, these are the QR codes. You can scan them and you can go to our website and find the report, which is available online. If you look at the report, it basically covers 6 work streams. The first one is on risk assessment. Basically, the modeling exercise which was conducted, a macroeconomic impacts assessment also, to see that what is the kind of indirect impact that happens on economies due to the direct impacts on infrastructure systems. We have the global surveys that I mentioned, and then the report also goes into 4 thematic areas on finance, on institutions and governance, on technologies, and on nature-based solutions for resilient infrastructure. And it goes into a deep dive of each of these topics to provide case studies, roadmaps, as well as checklists for institutions and governments to take action on these specific areas. Something that I also want to highlight here, which is a key message of the report, is the framework, the common analytical framework that the report provides. So basically, what it says is that in order to build resilience of infrastructure systems, it is important to equally focus on building capacities to absorb shocks, capacity to respond and recover from shocks, as well as capacity to, as well as focusing on the speed of reconstruction, because the faster the recovery, the smaller the economic impacts. So this whole cycle that you see, and you will see all the themes, across the report are focusing on these 3 stages of the infrastructure resilience cycle, which are equally important and through which countries and stakeholders can accrue resilience benefits or the resilience dividend, which is both the direct benefits as well as co-benefits arising out of this action. So that is a key message that you will find in the report. Then to give you a quick snapshot of each of the work streams, like I mentioned that we did infrastructure risk assessments through modeling. This was done through a CDRI's GIRI model. It is the first publicly available probabilistic risk model, which looks at impacts on infrastructure sectors. It currently covers 9 infrastructure sectors for 7 kinds of hazards, the one that you see here on my screen. And for each of these sectors and for hazards, it is able to provide risk information at the national level for all countries across the globe. So from this analysis, what we found that if we look at the global level, currently, as per the modeling exercise, we can expect average annual losses of more than $700 billion across different infrastructure sectors and geographies. And what we were also able to find that, if it is in a business as usual scenario, considering that a lot of countries and economies and cities are developing across the globe, if we consider that scenario, due to this expansion of infrastructure assets and services, these losses are expected to increase by 30 to 60%, which is, of course, a risk, but it is also a great opportunity because almost 70% of infrastructure in developing countries is still, yet to be built. But we also know that at the same time, currently, almost only 4 to 5% of global climate funds are going into adaptation and resilience. So that is also a key action areas for governments and stakeholders to focus on with respect to resilience financing. Again, a quick snapshot of the regional analysis that we did. So we did an in-depth analysis using the GIRI model for two regions across the globe, for the SIDS and Africa. In case of SIDS, the information is available for all the SIDS together, but also for specifically for the Pacific, for the Caribbean and Indian Ocean SIDS. Similarly, if you look at the report which was prepared for Africa, not just the sectors and specific hazards, it is also able to inform that, for instance, in the African continent, Eastern Africa is the region which is most expected to be at risk. So this kind of information is available from the report. Similarly, a snapshot of national and subnational assessments that we did for 12 countries. And again, from this assessment, the information that you are able to get is basically in three formats: the dominant risks and sectors that are impacted, what are the regional variations because of different kinds of hazards and sectoral impacts, and third, and also very important considering the changing climate, what we found that hydrometeorists are actually becoming more and more important, and are expected to cause more losses going forward. So just to again show you the kind of information that was available, it is in terms of a spatial assessment as well. One quick note, specifically about this region that we are discussing today. The GREEN model also provides information on emerging risks like heat waves, and also we have added irrigation systems this year to the analysis. So, for example, it is able to provide a snapshot at the regional level for Asia, for specifically for Central Asia, where we are seeing elevated heat waves and extreme heat risks, which are further expected to increase the impacts going forward. Similarly, for the European region as well, where cold waves still continue to dominate the risks, but of course, going forward, this is again a region which is expected to see more and more heat related risks. To give you a quick snapshot on the macroeconomic assessment, again, what we found, the impacts that you were seeing so far were because of the direct impacts on infrastructure. But what we found that if you look at the indirect impacts on economies also, these numbers are actually going to increase by as much as 7%, the average annual loss figures. But at the same time, the good thing is that if the reconstruction and recovery is done faster, the impacts can be minimized in terms of macroeconomic impacts. And what we found from our analysis that if the full reconstruction is happening within 10 years, these macroeconomic impacts can actually be reduced by half of that 7 times that we see in the business as usual scenario. I will not go into the details of the survey because Savina is going to cover that, but a key important point is on institutional capacities and also several aspects related to governance systems, which Savina will be covering. We also did the business survey, like I mentioned, and this was actually the most extensive survey assessing the impact of infrastructure failures on businesses so far. And what we found was that the infrastructure companies are so far taking most action because, of course, disasters are impacting them the most from an infrastructure resilience perspective. But what we also found that, you would expect that large businesses would be taking a lot of action and they would be more resilient. But what we found that while early warning systems and digital information and analytics is available to them, only half of those numbers are actually able to access that information and have reliable vendors. So So the point here is that it's not just about building resilience of individual businesses, but taking a value chain approach so that even the smaller businesses which are there in the supply chain are able to build their resilience to be able to build the resilience of businesses as a whole. Small businesses are of course most impacted, and they need support from government in terms of enabling policies, but also credit lines and recovery support in the aftermath of disasters. Quickly on finance, of course, this was a key area, and I would urge you to look at the chapter in detail. But one important point is that insurance is not enough. It can only address the residual risks. What is needed is to be able to provide a layered array of financial instruments across the infrastructure life cycle, the framework that I shared with you earlier. Then on technologies, we did a review of more than 35 new technologies, more than 100 case studies that you will see in the working paper, which is available on CDRI website. And from that, again, what are the kind of technologies which are already being implemented? Across different kinds of geographies. But at the same time, what we also found was that only 10 to 12% are actually being consistently used. So what you will see in the report is a technology readiness checklist, because technologies are ever changing. So what is needed is for institutions and governments to be able to build their capacity to adopt and scale up new technologies and their application. So that is what the report basically provides as a key message. Similarly, in terms of other innovative solutions like nature-based solutions, again, we have seen a lot of pilots, but to be able to scale those pilots for substantial benefits, while NBS provide a lot of, they are very cost effective, but in order to scale them, what is the kind of institutional readiness that is needed, not just from a technical perspective, but also from a governance perspective, from a finance perspective. So basically what you will find in the report is a institutional readiness checklist that kind of provides a step-by-step process for stakeholders and agencies to assess them and prepare themselves for scaling NBS solutions. So I'll stop here, and I know Savina is going to be talking in more detail about the survey, but this is just to leave you with this, with these links over here on which you can go on the CDRI website and our DRI Connect platform, where you can find the report, but also other resources, including background working papers, including learning videos, including a lot of bite-sized videos for you to go through. So thank you very much, and over to you, Savina.
Thank you so much, Raina, and to CDRI for your leadership in pulling this global reference on infrastructure resilience. Lots of content, lots of evidence that we really do need to make the case for infrastructure resilience, but also to accelerate its implementation. So allow me now to briefly introduce the Global Infrastructure Resilience Survey, which is actually is the largest of its kind in terms of surveying infrastructure professionals on infrastructure resilience, and is something that at ICSI we're extremely proud of. We gather over 3,000 responses from over 100 countries and over 100 expert interviews from 47 countries, so a very rich database of responses. We work with a number of implementation partners, including FIDIC as a lead partner, but also the World Federation of Engineering Organization, American Society of Civil Engineers, the Engineering Council of Civil Engineers, and others, to ensure that we had a broad regional and sectoral coverage. Respondents came from across private sector, that probably was the biggest share, followed by government, and then NGOs, financial institution, and academia all combined, probably about a third of the responses. And we covered thematic areas such as governance in institutions, finance, risk assessment, advanced technologies, and nature-based solutions, to provide further evidence to support then the Global Infrastructure Resilience report that Raina just presented on. And we analyze findings, taking global snapshots, but also analyzing by income group according to the World Bank classification, and also by region, which is how we could then identify both global and regional patterns and income level patterns to try and understand, how they what was the meaningful contextual difference in the findings that we analyzed. So just to give you a very quick overview of globally what this survey is telling us, the clearest message is probably that the top government action that is needed for implementation of infrastructure resilience across the globe. We need stronger policies, standards, and enforcement. So that's kind of something that came across through every region. So it's a very strong global message as a top priority that infrastructure professionals see. So this is not, it's kind of a quite broad spectrum of infrastructure professionals that from the ground, from their own country see this is a priority. And another central finding is that persistent gap between what is the policy ambition or the policy that is trying to kind of what we're trying to achieve here and what is actually being implemented on the ground. So the survey points to weak institutional and human capacity, chronic underfunding of what we call invisible measures, and I'll tell you more about this, which are the maintenance and retrofitting, but also risk assessments are being applied inconsistently. And so all of these weaknesses and barriers create a bit of an implementation ceiling. So that if you combine all of this, it means that then implementation is stalling across a number of different areas, such as the institutional and technical capacity, and then what we need to be doing to actually scale up resilience and the adoption of solutions. So, and the thread that is running through all of this is the professional capacity. So there are gaps in obviously skills, but also in availability of human capital. And this is why good solutions don't scale. And so this gap needs professional development and educational reform to actually be addressed properly. So this is just to provide a bit of a flavor because I'm going to go into a bit more detail on these topics when we actually then zoom in into Europe and Central Asia. So for next slide, please. So this is a QR code to the working paper that provide full findings from our survey across all regions and income levels. And you can access this on the QR code, and probably the team can also share a link in the chat so that you can access this resource. And then next slide, please, because it's now time to move on to the panel segment, and I'm delighted to introduce our panelists at this point. So let me welcome Tuncay Doroglu, Professor of Environmental Engineering and founding rector at Eskişehir University in Turkey. Lucy Anderson, who is the Director of Sustainability of the International Union of Railways, UIC. Giampiero Nacci, Managing Director, Climate Strategy and Delivery at EBRD, European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. Federico Di Gennaro, Head of Innovation Study Center European Projects at Autostrade per l'Italia, Italy. And then Floris Bogart, Senior Consultant at Deltares, and also a professor at Hanse University in Groningen. So welcome all of you, and thank you so much for being here today. And let me just maybe explain how this panel we will take this panel into three different parts, so there's slightly different setup, and we will just look through different topics, such as the first one, governance, policy, regulation, and standards for resilience. Then we will move on to a different topic of financing long-term resilience. And then finally, we will be talking about scaling solutions and building professional capacity. So what I will do, I will just give a little bit of context on each one of these topics from the findings of the survey, and specifically with a zoom into the region we're talking about today, which is Europe and Central Asia. And so here's the first one then on governance, policy, regulation, and standards for resilience. So what we could see here is that in the Europe and Central Asian region, 55% of respondents to our survey reported variable institutional capacity. And this is due to different reasons: staff turnover, frequent rotation, and reliance on external contractors. And all of this erode institutional memory, even where the technical capacity exists. So charts on the slide show that the majority of respondents said that regulation codes and standards exist in the region, but only just about a fourth described them as adequate. And the picture on enforcement is quite stark because robust enforcement that entails mandatory third-party verification and penalties if standards and codes are not applied is reported by only just over 10% of respondents in the region. And less than a quarter report minimal formal enforcement altogether, and compliance with the standards rarely reaches subnational level. So there is actually a message here on enforcement for the region that I'd be curious to know if from the panelists if they see this also. And the headline finding here that even if the policy and regulatory frameworks exist, the region lacks consistent translation from policy to local delivery. And this is where this global gap that we identified, and I said I presented earlier, shows up quite clearly in this region. So let me just stop because we had a lot of presentations so far, and then let me just bring the panel in onto this specific topic. So if we can stop sharing the slide, please. And here's our panel. So welcome again, all of you. Let me just start asking you for your views on a specific point on turning strong national frameworks into the consistent local delivery, that point that I just made. And what needs to change? What does need to change in governance, in standards, in professional practices? So what do we need when we need to change? So if I may come to you, Giampiero, first, maybe to get your view from your perspective.
Thank you very much, Sabina. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I'm not going to spend time on about what DBRD is because I assume colleagues connected are, but of course I'm happy to give more details if needed. So in our experience, there are multiple elements, of course, that needs to be taken into account, but I would suggest three. And again, there are many others, right? So I don't want to be perceived as a oversimplistic, right? But certainly the element of data and availability of modeling and forecasting capacity is a critical one. So it's the technical capacity to understand the vulnerability context and assess risk. The second one is a governance. So to have the right functions in place, the right responsibilities and accountability, but also the processes that link the actual identification of the risks with concrete actions. So the broader governance piece. And I would say something which is not necessarily perhaps answering completely, maybe it's slightly off topic in terms of your question, but is really also linking all these elements to the financial sector. So there is no point of coming up with all these elements if ultimately these don't lead to identification of investments and interventions, and ultimately something that speaks to the financial sector, that is bankable, is financeable. And often that's the problem. And by the way, I'm talking primarily, not exclusively, about resilience associated to the effects of climate change. Clearly, the resilience piece is much broader. So that's our main angle, I would say, at DBRD. So these are the three of the multiple components that I believe are needed. And the last one is particularly critical because often a lot of work is done without taking into consideration that when it comes to financing resilience investments, while the economic case is very clear and increasingly evident, the commercial case is not always so well defined. And if there isn't a commercial case, it's very difficult to provide the finance which is required. This is in the general terms. Now, I would like to give you a couple of examples because ultimately I think it's good to bring some concrete case studies. I would like to give two. One which is connected to the region and one which is not, but I like it because it's one of the projects I'm particularly proud of. Let me start with the one outside the region. Is the support that EBRD provided to the Moroccan national port authorities. This was a work done in the last few years. And basically entailed the following components: a technical assistance package to help the national. By the way, the National Port Authority of Morocco is a government, is a public entity that manages a number of operates a number of port assets in Morocco. Not all ports, but some of the ports. And basically, the project we did with them was, first of all, utilizing a small grant component from the Global Environmental Facility to help setting up a dedicated functions within the management of this organization, with a strong focus on bringing the technical expertise to assess vulnerability context and analyze risk, but also, again, with a full governance package, in terms of how, in fact, climate risks are used to inform the planning in the first place, but also to inform the identification of the interventions and the priority of the interventions. So led really to it took some time to get the whole system up and running, but now this function is completely operational. They also acquired later on modeling capacity. So it's a really interesting model of how a state organization take ownership of climate risk and is able to influence the planning and investment prioritization. And as a result, we provided finance 40 million euro loan to the national port authorities, which were the result of this work and this analysis and this prioritization for coastal defense interventions in 6 port terminals in Morocco. It's a really good example of this type of more sort of integrated approach. The second one that I would like to raise is at the municipal level, at the subnational level. At DBRD, we have a strong focus on cities, because we believe it's faster. How should I say? You can achieve faster action when it comes to climate change, including in respect to climate resilience. So we've been supporting in the last, I would say, 18 months, the city of Timișoara in Romania. So go back into the region of focus. With the city of Timișoara, as many other cities in the world, have been exposed to extreme heat for several years. And this has become a top priority for the municipality, for the mayor, for the city council, with very significant effects on productivity, on health, of course, and well-being. And so the work we provided to them was in the context of a broader engagement on sustainability action plans and investment. We supported the 2 things, a mapping of heat stress and also the interactions with economic activity and with communities and social groups, but also out of this vulnerability assessment and the creation of a capacity in the city to have this map and to use it for informing the master plan, but also specific interventions. There are 4 areas of intervention. One is in terms of creating the scope for an early warning system to anticipate when heat stress events are going to occur, but also 3 specific areas of quick intervention. One is about it's about interventions in schools to increase the shading and to increase the ability of schools to cope with the effects of extreme heat, but also an intervention is in the old center. It's again shading and greening program, which combines street shading, courtyard greening, but also improved transport stops. It's about also the operation of the transport system to protect public life and economic activity in the historic center. And then there is also another element which is about upgrading, if I'm not mistaken, about 10,000 plus apartments with shading, improving insulation, cool roofs to address chronic overheating in the type of building stock of Timișoara. Now, all of these interventions, of course, entail significant investment as well. But what we realize is also that the economic return is always very attractive. Again, not always is easy to make a bankable project out of it, but in terms of the economic return, the numbers are very substantial. If you include the economic effects, but also the effects on well-being and cost of healthcare. Maybe I'll stop it here, but I think these are good example of state interventions plus city level engagement.
Thank you, Giampiero. I mean, this is what we need, right? We need success stories and see what might be possible. Can I just ask you a quick follow-up? I know I'm already digressing, but It is so true. The economic case is mature, the commercial case is not. But what convinced you then to loan? Like what is that one thing that convinced you?
To be honest, was not us. Is the mayors was convinced, that these interventions were needed and that could generate because ultimately it's not just about economic return, I would say in monetary terms, is also making the city of, Timisoara is a city that has a lot of investment in startups, in fintech. So it's in a location which is at the border with Central Europe. So the mayor has a lot of interest to promote the city as a very competitive, attractive hub for businesses. So there is, of course, a direct correlation about the ability to offer a business environment which is attractive, which is addressing some of the issues. So again, it was not so easy to make the commercial case, but for the city, this became a priority project exactly to retain the attractiveness of Timisoara as a place for investments, attract the investors from Romania, but also from other parts of Europe.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So let me just maybe change slightly and move more to a sectoral perspective. So I'm coming to you, Lucy, where obviously we see this climate risk increasing and resilience is still being implemented unevenly. So what's your perspective on the biggest gaps in harmonization today and how you're helping your members? Tell us a bit more.
Yeah, I mean, harmonization is kind of one of our magic words at UIC because it's kind of where we're set up, sort of bring this global railway community together to really share and work in ways that are interoperable, right? So this is something that we've been working with our members on, and it's clear where we are converging is that everyone is already affected by climate change, and it's fast becoming the first #1 significant business continuity risk for railways all over the world, in fact. So that's clear. And so that kind of leadership awareness is very high now. And so that strategic level sort of governance is coming in quite quickly. So we're seeing it sort of being really considered as a high risk piece now. I think it's just about now maturing to getting to a point where it's really becoming part of operational implementation and making it part of the way that we run railways every day and plan our future railways. And similar to what I saw in your results, infrastructure managers are going first, of course. They're really seeing the impact and really are charged with looking after the infrastructure. But the operators and the freight operators and the passenger operators is really seeing the risk to their business as well and starting to get on board to really understand how they need to be part of this. So there is a bit of a fragmentation in railway sometimes between the infrastructure manager and the operator. So there's one of the places where there's some fragmentation that we can improve harmonization and collaboration. But there is a variability, of course, in maturity, in approaches, which climate projections they're choosing to look at. And so and particularly on how we measure and KPIs of how resilient we are, what our adaptive capability is, the KPIs we're still a long way from having sort of harmonious ways to measure that. But that's certainly something that our groups are looking to do together. And so it's really about sort of co-creating, coming together, sharing their best practice so we can start to move towards something more harmonious. And that's what we've been doing on our Resilient Railways programme for both two key hazards so far, high temperatures and the rain and flooding events. They're the two biggies for railways, and they've worked to develop a consistent approach framework for the risk assessment, looking at the vulnerability and the criticality and guidance on climate projection. So it's through this sort of sharing of best practice, bringing the community of practice together that can help to sort of move forward into more harmonious places. But I think the biggest gap, in fact, is between modes for us in a sectoral point of view for transport. How often are railways working with, say, roads or inland waterways, airports, ports that are in the same geographies, in the same corridors? How often are we really working to do collective vulnerability assessment? Because often the most vulnerable part of the network is perhaps on the mode that gets us to the people to the station, or perhaps we're more vulnerable where the port is fine, but the railway getting to the port is more vulnerable. So there needs to be, I think, a lot more collective work across thinking at a more system level around our risks and what's really critical.
And you are, thank you, Lucy. And you are, I think, if you want to share, there is this cross-sectoral multimodal thinking is starting to emerge, right, amongst UIC and other organizations. If you want to share a bit more.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks. Yeah, and it's been a pleasure to have ICSI coming into a bit of a group that we've been developing with ACI Airports, UITP, so that's the public transport NGO, with also the PIANC, the navigation, inland navigation, and PIARC, the road federation. So we're really all recognizing that this is a critical issue for our members, whether that's governments or operators, and we're seeing where we can work together in a more cohesive way and really learn for each other, see if there's ways we can share information better, and start to look at harmonious ways at system level for transport, even maybe one day energy systems as well, which again is another cascading infrastructure that is so critical for transport movement as well.
Thank you, Lucy. So let me again, switch a little bit, but very related is Tunjai. I'm coming to you this time, and so Lucy just thought about how the professional bodies or industry bodies can help. How can universities and research and professional training help policymakers and increasing that capacity, institutional technical capacity we've been talking about? Can you share an example from Turkey?
Thank you, Savina. Now I would like to share two examples from Turkey following the recent earthquake. First one is from our work, and the second one about national level, let's say. Immediately following the earthquake, I received an invitation to join Sustainable Infrastructure Learning Network, initiated by the Nicholas Institute at the university, and based on ECO model, which also includes ICSI. Subsequently, this communication, a sustainable infrastructure ECO hub was established in our country. We have been providing training within this framework for 1.5 years. Following this initiative, a new digital learning platform was created as part of Erasmus project, EPDNet project, focusing on achieving urban resilience through nature-based solutions. The prepared course contents was also integrated into our ECO programs. Our main goal is increase awareness and competence of professionals, decision makers, academics, and students, and to contribute to building lasting collaborations. These case-based training sessions have received considerably interest in the field and continue as a series for a long time. The second example concerns a special project call for the earthquake zone. After the earthquake, last earthquake, the Scientific and Technological Research Council of Turkey issued a specific project call. This program set an important example in involving universities in post-disaster recovery. Rather than directly conducting joint projects with local administrations, the program ensured the preservation of regional capacity by connecting researchers affected by the earthquake to active R&D. Within the scope of this program, more or less 2,700 projects were supported in the provinces affected by the earthquake. The outcomes and the results of all the projects were shared with the public. However, many of these collaborations remained project-based or emergency-driven. The challenge is scaling them then into a permanent system, of course. I think for effective cooperation between academia and local government, we work on large scales. Several points in particular need to be considered. Long-term and sustainable collaborations between local government and universities based on mutual trust, cooperation, and co-creation. And multidisciplinary teams for solving real-world problems and transforming science into decisions are three of them very, very important, of course.
Thank you so much, Tunjai. I thought your example of working with the local government. I mean, it's always unfortunately a disaster that gives us that window of opportunity, right, and pushes us to do things differently. And that's, yeah, I mean, it's one of those things. But I'm glad that you have taken that opportunity to learn and build back. I suppose forward, not build back better. I think build back better is the what everyone uses. But yeah, thank you so much for sharing. So let me just maybe go to other panelists that we haven't heard from up until now, and we are moving the topic a little bit and thinking about standards. That our findings for the region said, okay, there are standards, there are policy frameworks, there's methodologies, but they're not either they're not fit for purpose or they're unevenly applied. And so what does need to change? Also on the side of enforcement, I'd be curious to know whether you see this enforcement issue that we detected through the survey, they do, and where does accountability sit to actually make it happen, make it so that the technical standards are enforced. Coming to you, Floris, first, because the Netherlands has been, leading in many different ways, thinking about adaptive pathways, thinking about future climate scenarios. I mean, way before anyone really did, I must say. So we're learning from you. Tell us about this and how they can be, this way of thinking can be transferred across contexts. Now Europe really needs it.
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, thanks for that I can join. And very interesting results, of course, on the survey. Yeah, from specifically Dutch perspective, of course, we have a bit of different setting. Being under sea level, we worked on it for a couple of 100 years. Just mentioning this because that really explains the governance system that we have. We have water authorities. They acquire money, so they have their own set of goals that they can enforce. Of course, with cooperation of municipalities, basically a quadruple helix. Most of the things are happening with private and public sector, of course, and also the residents. It's mostly their back and front yards that we work with. And of course, being a professor, academic and education is very important. So that's most of the basis if we talk about some very specific examples, because when I go to Asia or other regions in the world, it's very important to explain some of the good examples, so to say. Room for the rivers, of course, one of those. Indeed, also the adaptation pathways that are being used a lot. So there are a lot of frameworks or methods that you can apply. To put it very simple, mostly it's about analyzing, as been mentioned. It's having the data, not only technical, but also from the people that suffer. It depends on the hazard that you approach, of course. And then it's about ambition. And ambition can be very high, which we sometimes have in Europe and also in Asia. And of course, we're limited by budget, we're limited by capacity, we're limited by space. So these three are very important. So happy that we have reports, MOOCs, surveys that we have now, because it gives us a lot of information to come to the third stage, and that's action. And I think sometimes we we wait too long, because we can start by learning by doing and implementing things and learn from it, and then the real questions approach. And also adaptation pathways, they're being it's a great method, but they change with changes in government, changing in budget, changing in space, changing with hazards. So, for example, in the Netherlands, we have the Delta Plan. It's existing since 1953, when we had a dike break. 2,000 people died. So that was really a reason, as we have in other cities, New Orleans, Katrina, Copenhagen, of course. It's really a moment that we change policies, that we change to rules. It's the momentum we have to use, of course. And then all these Delta Plan approaches. So mostly we are now targeting, from our perspective, on drought, heat, and water nuisance. So that could be from sea, but also from the rivers, of course, and also from the high intensive rainfall. But in the Netherlands, we also have water coming up because we're below sea level. So that's quite important to understand. What I like is that simple approach. Analyzing first, seeing what the problem is, having that ambition, and talk about it in a quadruple helix way. Everybody has different ambitions, and then go to action, and basically start with action a bit sooner than we expected, just to learn from it and see what kind of conflicts there are, or residents have questions suddenly about mosquitoes. Green and blue implementation in the cities is also having maladaptation or other effects. And if you address that very soon, you can have a very smooth curve in implementation and upscaling of nature-based solutions. And that sounds simple. There are more than 100 different measures that are being called nature-based solutions. The big ones in the river, room for the river, for example, but also biofiltration in cities, for example. So there's no blueprint printing it at all, but I quite like that programs like room for the river are being addressed in most Asian cities now. It's not rocket science. It's you have to give room. We have to build in the right places. We have to enforce as well that we don't live in sometimes in the right place, and also have innovation there. So no, not surprising, amphibious housing or floating urbanization is quite big in the Netherlands, and we also provoke that, of course, in other countries. So yeah, let me stop there before I get too excited. Yeah,
that's great. We need people passionate about this topic to keep on spreading the love, I guess. We haven't seen the little heart there, spreading the knowledge, spreading the knowledge, and the knowledge, other than love, the knowledge of nature-based solutions and what works, what doesn't. Federico, coming to you now. So you are here. You are the kind of infrastructure owner operator here, right? So you're kind of like a different perspective yet. And then tell us about what you see. Do you see gaps in standards? What challenges you face? How do you address this within your organization when you implement programs?
Yes, thank you, Sabina. Nice to meet with everybody. Thanks for being here. It's a real pleasure to bring the perspective of Autostrade per Italia. Just let me give a little bit of context about who is Autostrade per Italia, because we are a motorway operator. We are the biggest one in Italy. We manage roughly 3,000 kilometers of highway network, with more than 400 kilometers of tunnels and more than 4,000 of bridges and viaducts. So you will agree with me that we have a lot of challenges. And the main problem related to standards is that many infrastructure standards are based on historical climate assumptions, while the assets we are designing, but mostly upgrading and refurbishing today, must and should perform under future climate conditions that are completely different, no? So the gap becomes most evident when dealing with, for example, drainage systems, slope stability, bridge hydraulics, pavement performance, and especially the management of extreme weather events. So the problem is that traditional standards basically define a minimum compliance requirements, but resilience, you know better than me, demands that we understood how the assets we have today will behave under more frequent and severe heat waves, intense rainfall, flooding, and also the cascading effect of a disruption. No, maybe later on in the discussion, we'll bring you also some examples. But basically, to address these challenges, we internally deployed the three main changes. The first one was to integrate different units, so engineering, climate science, and asset management department, in order to basically incorporate climate projection into investment decision. This is the first one. The second one, we developed a lot of digital monitoring and predictive analytics solutions that basically allowed us to understand the main vulnerabilities across our network in order to make priorities, no? Based on risk instead of classifying on the asset condition, no? And third and last, we try to embed resilience criteria into our investment programs in order to upgrade and basically evaluate this intervention, not only on technical compliance, but on the ability of the assets to withstand future climate scenarios. So it's still an ongoing work, quite tough, but we believe that the accountability should be shared, no? Among regulators, infrastructure operators, institutions, in order to push, really to push hardly the change of standards to evolve from reflecting the past to prepare the infrastructure for the future.
Thank you, Federico. I have at least 10 follow-up questions, but I can't ask you right now. So maybe a different conversation. But because we're on a little late, I'm going to condense the next two questions into one set of questions. So I'll give you all, a question to answer, but I will just conflate a little bit the two topics that I'm going to be talking about now, so that we can give you enough time to actually make your intervention. So let me just talk about now the financing for resilience, the long-term resilience. In the region, we saw that only just 11% of respondents, so very, very low, thought that there is comprehensive nationwide retrofitting programs that are being funded. And 60% that said that public funding meets less than a quarter of resilience and maintenance needs. So, this is a message that resilience is really not really being supported enough, through public funding. And definitely there are financing needs. Investment keeps on flowing, and this is something that I said at the start. We called it in the report the invisible resilience measures. So it seems that projects that gets funded and financed are more the kind of the new shiny piece of infrastructure that you can have. They are more visible politically, and therefore they are being prioritized, perhaps at the expenses of the invisible resilience measure that are actually the risk-based maintenance, the retrofitting, and in Europe, where there's so much built infrastructure, this is quite important, right? We can't really fall back on, and we know there is a big backlog on this risk-based maintenance and retrofitting, but where is the money coming from, if it's not being prioritized? And then obviously bureaucratic bottlenecks, resilience budgets that are not earmarked explicitly, and that's kind of obviously a problem. But the region has access to sophisticated instruments, the PPPs, the green and thematic bonds, and expanding insurance markets. So why aren't they being applied consistently? Why aren't they being used? So that's kind of something that is emerging. And maybe the next slide, I wanted to also take the opportunity to give you a bit of detail on the techno scaling solution and building professional capacity. The survey specifically looked at the advanced technology and nature-based solutions as potential solutions for resilient infrastructure. They are being used selectively across the region. For advanced technology, only just over 60% of respondents reported that the 62% of respondents reported that these are only just being used for high-profile projects, the advanced technology, and not as a matter of course. For nature-based solution, over half of the respondents reported using isolated projects. So not being used again, as a matter of course, and something that is widespread. And only just 10% reported consistent application. So barriers here being identified: regulatory inertia, fragmentation, institutional fragmentation, or lack of capacity, of course, the absence of national strategies, and the expertise is uneven. And on nature-based solutions specifically, the in-house capacity within governments varies, with some municipalities that are ahead of national ministry that often lack the expertise in this kind of solutions. That's something that emerges as well for the region. So the headline finding in essence is, it's not that the region is short on knowledge or capital, but what is missing is the mandates, the institutional condition, and the professional capacity to move from pilot to standard practice. That's kind of like where we are on the scaling solution and building professional capacity. Now, I'm going to ask you now the panel, we have a little less than 15 minutes, so I'm going to ask all of you a question, and the question is more on the scaling solution and the professional capacity. But if you want to bring in other points that you had on the financing or examples, please do. So let me just focus on nature-based solution and advanced technologies now, and come to you again, Floris, because as I said, the Netherlands has been pioneering and is that leading example. So tell us about where you see the most, I suppose, the solution with most potentials that can be scaled up.
Yeah, it's a very good question. Yeah, and from the Netherlands, of course, we had to learn as well. I'm sometimes a bit embarrassed if the New York Times is bringing the Dutch, and it's a learning process. I think one of the, maybe to give just an example, otherwise we talk very theoretically. 30 years ago, a change in the Netherlands was starting to put biofiltration instead of gray tubes, so sewer engineering. That was 30 years ago, and that was not our idea. We went to Germany with some excursions to see multiregolen systems, so basically bioswales, rain gardens, and it was new for the Netherlands. And then a transition has to start, and if you have to make a successful transition, it always starts slowly, but then it should be mainstream, and then it should be, fully adapted with legalization, everything. And we called one of the systems, which is the bioswale, we call it the Wadi, Arabic name. So it was really about influence from the Middle East, from Asia, and as well. What kickstarted it, the first was a big implementation in the eastern part of the Netherlands, which is above sea level, which is a bit easier than in the low parts. Some key elements that made it a success was that a lot of national organizations made guidelines. We did a lot of tours from different municipalities to that region to show that it was successful. There were a lot of interviews with people that were very happy with the grass and the openness, and they didn't have nuisance of mosquitoes or children were drowning or living in a swamp. A lot of very practical questions that have been answered in a very early stage with academics, of course, and residents, as been told. Surveys like this one was very early. And then enthusiastic helped, and it really helped that there were some how do you call it, early adapters or ambassadors of this system that were enthusiastic. They went to a lot of international congresses promoting it, and now we're in a situation that after a lot of policy governance and steps being made by water authorities and other quadruple helix partners from private and public, that now we have over 20,000 of these bioswales. There's no municipality anymore that doesn't implement this. And I think it's a very important step on being resilient. Of course, not from the sea, but from nuisance. And I love every swale that's being implemented in the Netherlands. I flooded over 200 of them just to show that they actually work, that they infiltrate the water, and that people still have questions, and we answer them in academic ways with a lot of universities and applied universities as well. So I think those key elements, if I look back, having trust, very early research, getting with questions, so go to action as soon as possible, because also other This is a successful one. There were other ones that I don't want to name, but were less successful due to maintenance actually clogging a lot. If that happens, you have an unsuccessful, and you better have the research ready and to break off that curve and be promoted by very cost-efficient nature-based solutions instead of maybe more gray systems, which is more information in the report, of course, of CDRI and in the survey. Let me stop there because you started with
Thank you,
little time.
Floris.
Yeah, all right.
Thank you, Floris. Yes.
Yeah.
And important to demonstrate that these are performing in the long term. It's important for understanding the OPEX, right, and requirements, and also to make the case for using them. Federico, coming to you, tell us some examples of what Autostrade per l'Italia is implementing in terms of solutions, and other examples you wanted to share with us briefly.
Yeah. Now, basically, we are trying to implement not only natural-based solution, but we are trying more to combine and scale prominent solution and technologies. Because the problem, I mean, I'm responsible for the innovation, so I'm deeply involved into problems. We moved from isolated pilot projects to focus on the operational integration, because this is the toughest part. This is the difficult part to demonstrate measurable benefits, no? Because we cannot implement, let's say, wow solutions or technologies without a real impact on safety, security, and on the economics, no? But for example, I'll tell you a story. After the tragic event of the Morandi Bridge, we completely reshaped our company. And one positive effect was the implementation of a new asset management system from the technological perspective, but also a governance approach completely reshaped. And this, I'll give an example, led to a successful success story a couple of months ago, because we have a huge landslide in Italy, the Petacciato landslide, and we were able to restore the highway in less than 48 hours, thanks to an improved governance system, dealing with all the stakeholders involved, with our national railway operator, with the civil protection, with firefighters. So we were really able to provide an added value. And this was the result of an improved procedure, a shared governance system. So we're really able to provide a good and concrete result.
Really, I love the soft resilience measure, right? You know, like the governance, you know, not all needs to be, you know, physical infrastructure. Giampiero, coming to you, and if you probably had good points also on the finance, so please give us a bit of a, you know, I suppose, where do you see professional technical capacity, you know, needs, and how, you know, and what solutions do you see, you know, are necessary to scale up resilience?
Yeah, thank you. The very interesting conversation. You know, would be great to have a bit more time to elaborate. But maybe I'll build a bit on what Floris and Federico were mentioning, because when it comes to nature-based solution, I believe there is an issue of approach and process more than technologies and cost. You know, because and I can give you a specific example. Often the barrier is not economic, perhaps it's not even financial, but is really linked to other conditions. For example, procurement rules or procurement approaches that make it difficult to integrate nature-based solution in an infrastructure project. Or often is about as well the fact that the business model that underpin an infrastructure project makes it difficult to integrate nature-based solution. So I'll give you one example of where this worked for us. You know, it's the city of Chisinau, is the capital of Moldova, where we financed a few years back, together with the EIB, the European Investment Bank, and the Global and the Green Climate Fund, the flooding protection sort of system to help city dealing with the increased frequency of flooding from the river back that crossed the city. And this was possible, again, talking about approach, you know, because we engage early in the city, helping them preparing what we call Green City Action Plan. So a set of interventions, you know, priority interventions to address, you know, particular issue, but also to improve sustainability. And that allowed to identify, from an economic perspective, the nature-based solution as the by far the most effective. So this helped, was an input into upgrading the master plan, but also informing the procurement process in a way that allowed, this type of solution to emerge as possible and as economic attractive. And as a result, this is under implementation as we speak. So in TASE, it's quite significant. It's 20 million euro investment. It's about 8 kilometers of river banks being adjusted. In TASE, something like 90 rain gardens, many dozens of 3 pits. All this kind of solution that not only reduce the cost of flooding, and is also the most economic solution, by the way, but also, of course, include let's say improve the availability for the community of green spaces, and in general, makes also the city more attractive and more interesting. What we know is that invariably, again, we need to start from the basics, right? So invariably, most people prefer a nature-based solution to a gray solution. I guess it's confirmed. And I can tell you, in the financial sector, most investors prefer a green asset versus a non-green asset, right? Of course, as long as the returns are more or less confirmed, and as long as the risks are managed. Just to say that it's not necessarily an issue of, because look, the problem is not lack of finance. Finance is there. There is trillions of dollars of financing available. It's really about the approach and addressing the technical and regulatory barriers.
Thank you, Giampiero. I love that you share all these examples where things have worked out. We're not just talking about challenges. I feel that there's hope since it's worked elsewhere. So coming to you, Tunjai, and then Lucy, you two are, I'm going to ask a question to you. Like Tunjai, coming to you first, and this is more on the needs for current and future professionals. So what kind of skills and knowledge do they need, and can you share some examples?
Yeah. We are talking about transforming engineering education in all over the world, also in our country. I think the fundamental question for the future is not whether universities are lagging behind practitioners, but how well they can anticipate the skills practitioners will need, of course. In the age of climate change, digitalization, and resilience, successful universities will not only be institutions to produce knowledge, they will also be institutions that shape the engineering culture of the future, guide the evaluation of standards, and prepare students for problems yet to arise, of course. Therefore, the main aim of transformation in engineering education should be to shift from producing graduates who know current standards to producing professionals who can design the standards of the future. This is not so easy, I think, but when the transformation occurs, a significant portion of the gap between policy and practice will naturally close. The gap between policy and practice often stems not from a lack of technical knowledge, but from the training, organizational habits, and professional culture of the professionals who will apply this knowledge in the field. It's clear that universities need to change some things in engineering education to keep pace with the challenges faced by practitioners in the field and to close this gap. First of all, a feature-oriented design approach should be adopted instead of cost-oriented design approach. That is, climate projections and scenario-based design need to be integrated in the basic engineering education. The second point is that the shift from single discipline education to systems thinking is necessary. Students need to understand not only their own disciplines, but also the relationships between the systems. In this context, probably universities are expected to support the sector even after graduation by offering micro qualifications, certificate programs, continuous professional development training, and digital learning platforms. And the third point also is teaching how to develop standards, not just apply them, should be part of the curriculum. I think the most important tool for ensuring these aspects are program accreditation and also quality assurance in higher education. We are trying to follow these two quality assurance system also in our country. Thank you very much. I will stop here.
Thank you. Thank you, Tanjai. Thanks. And ICSI is very much, our hearts and minds are on the transforming engineering education, and we will shortly launch an initiative that supports this. Lucy, coming to you at the end, and I'd like to give you the floor to share examples from the rail sector on what you've seen from your members and anything you want to share on the solutions that are being implemented.
Yeah, and maybe to link back a little bit to what we're talking about in terms of investment gap and things. We know at railway we can't harden the whole of the railway network. We can't fit, make the whole of the railways like totally adapted, and so that's why the sort of these approaches to really understand risk, vulnerability, and the critical, which parts of the network are really critical, so that we can target our investment and then really demonstrate to our leaders that we're thinking about value for money, and we're thinking about the spending of taxpayers' money in the most sensible way, really focusing on disruption reduction and that sort of socioeconomic benefit, right? So nature-based solutions and technologies are really great ways to do exactly that, because they generally can offer really excellent value for money and really target things. So the technology piece, I think, is really useful because it shows emerging risk. It can get really early intervention, and we can do much more targeted inspection and maintenance if we start when we're starting to use GIS data, satellite technology, drone technology, remote monitoring, and some early warning systems to be able to sort of really use this technology instead of having to send teams of people to be trying to monitor a huge network. It's just not possible. So I think these sort of digital solutions can really be useful. We've got quite a lot of examples of that being used, certainly across the region we're talking about today. Adif, Bannon Denmark, Network Rail, they're all routinely now using GIS, remote monitoring, satellite data to even in Network Rail, they're using satellite data to monitor landslip risk, which is one of the significant risks for railways. And so they're able to see even the tiniest bit of movement and early detect where there might be risk of landslips, and which of course can be really dangerous and lead to derailment and therefore significant harm to people. Nature-based solution as well, really, people have been saying how cost effective it is today as well. And there's quite a few examples of that coming into the railways as well. Water management being the big one, runoff reduction, natural sort of swales that we've heard about today. The Swiss are good at this, the Austrians are good at this, as well, of course, the Dutch and the Germans. And thinking now also wider into that catchment management, right? So not just thinking about the infrastructure by the side of our railways, but starting to have collaboration at city and with for example, the Environment Agency in the UK. The Leeds example is great, where they actually worked at a whole catchment area and did work from the higher ends of the catchment to actually protect a critical asset in the middle of a city centre in Leeds, which not only protected that railway, but also protected the other infrastructure in that city and building, so that it gave a much broader protection instead of just trying to protect a particular asset with a hard engineering solution. So you're really starting to see that sort of socioeconomic benefit, that sort of broader value that you can deliver through collaboration and through sort of that more system thinking piece. So we're starting to see some really nice examples. Another nature-based solution, one that I love, is my favorite, is in the States for Norfolk Southern, big freight operator linking to a big port. and they had coastal erosion, quite significant coastal erosion, so that then having to move their railway all the way back is going to be a big, expensive, difficult thing, or having to do big, hard concrete sort of coastal protection is also really expensive. But they did really nice oyster beds, natural oyster beds that they were created along the coast. It brought back otters into the space that they never had before. Water quality was improved. They actually got money from nutrient credits because of the project they were doing, and they were able to prevent the coastal erosion and have a much more resilient port and rail link there. So some really nice sort of stories, which I love to tell to the biggest audience I can, to sort of spread the best practice and what's possible.
Thank you, Lucy. So we are over time, so unfortunately I need to wrap up. So it brings us to the end of today's session. Thank you so much to our panelists for sharing your knowledge and experience with us today. Funjai, Lucy, Giampiero, Federico, Floris. And thank you, Ryan and CDRI colleagues for setting the global context. Thank you, everyone who joined us today. I know there's been some exchanges in the chat on answering and questions. Thank you to those who have asked and answered questions. This is the first of our regional webinars. We will have one for Latin America, East Asia, Pacific, and Sub-Saharan Africa coming over the coming months, and would love to see you there. Maybe the last reflection for me is, like, I came into this this survey pointed out so many gaps, I guess, and challenges, but I come out from this discussion a bit more re-energized that actually there are solutions that we can do something about this. We just about talking more about what works and then sharing it widely, which is I hope what this webinar has achieved in the region. So you in the audience feel that actually it's not all doom and gloom. We can do this, but we need to be working on this quite a bit together. So thank you again, and have a lovely rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks, Selena.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.